dear creatures of curiosity, the echoes of Hawksmere's collapse still tremble through the moors. Last we left the valley, dust and blood mingled like incense to a wrathful god. The mine had fallen, yes, but so too had illusion. Lady Alianor, our once caged bird in green samite, rose not as a wife, but as a phoenix, bloodied, bare-souled, and newly born of ruin. She unearthed not only the ring that damned her husband, but the courage that would damn his name. Yet the hour of triumph is rarely the hour of peace. In the wake of the reckoning came silence, not merciful silence, but that brittle, dangerous stillness before the next wound is felt. The air of Hawksmere is thick with superstition, with whispers of witchcraft and judgment, and our poor priest must fight not only for justice, but for the very memory of truth itself. Tonight, as we open the weight of the crown, the blood is washed from trembling hands, and the living must learn how to bear what survival truly costs. The bodies may be buried, but power, power must be tended like a grave that refuses to stay closed. And for Lady Alianor de Clervaux, the crown she never wanted has settled upon her brow.
Chapter 15, The Weight of the Crown. The silence within St. Cuthbert's chapel wasn't peaceful. It was the fragile quiet of exhaustion, shock, and shared trauma, clinging to the cold, damp stones. Alianor, slumped against the rough-hewn pew, felt the tremors running through her. Aftershocks of adrenaline, terror, and the sheer physical toll of hours spent clawing at rock and binding wounds. Aemon's hand, large, battered, and infinitely warm, covered hers, an anchor in the storm of her unraveling nerves. The simple pressure, the undeniable reality of his presence, breathing, injured, but alive, was a lifeline thrown across weeks of despair. He didn't speak. Words felt inadequate, dangerous even, capable of shattering the precarious calm. His thumb moved in a slow, unconscious circle over her knuckles, a gesture of profound connection that spoke volumes. His own exhaustion was etched deep into the lines around his eyes, the pallor beneath the grime and bruising. He leaned his head back against the cold stone wall beside her, his breathing shallow but steady, his gaze fixed on the dust motes dancing in a weak shaft of light, struggling through a high, grimy window. The axe lay propped against the pew, a silent testament to the violence barely held at bay. Outside, the sounds of the aftermath were a low, persistent thrum, the weary shouts of men still shifting debris at the main mine entrance, the muffled weeping of women tending the injured or mourning the lost, the clatter of buckets, the distant whinny of horses. Life, battered but persistent, went on. Hawksmere, scarred and bleeding, was beginning the agonizing process of assessing the damage Roland de Mowbray had wrought. The chapel door creaked open, startling them both. Father Clement stood silhouetted against the gray daylight, his face etched with a profound weariness that mirrored their own. His cheekbone was swollen and discolored from the guard's blow, a stark reminder of the violence that had erupted. He carried a wooden bucket sloshing with clean water and a bundle of relatively clean rags under his arm. "Forgive the intrusion," he murmured, his voice raspy. He set the bucket down near them. "I thought, wounds need cleaning, even small ones." His gaze took in Alianor's ruined, blood-stained gown, her raw, blistered hands, the grime coating her face and neck. It lingered on Aemon, assessing the awkward angle he held his ribs, the deep bruising visible on his neck above his torn tunic, the pallor of blood loss beneath the dirt. Alianor pulled her hand gently from Aemon's, the loss of contact, immediate but necessary. "Thank you, Father." Her voice was hoarse, barely more than a whisper. She dipped a rag into the cold water, wringing it out, the shock of the cold, a welcome jolt. She started with her own hands, wincing as she wiped away mud and dried blood, revealing the raw scrapes and broken blisters beneath. The physical pain was grounding, a counterpoint to the emotional maelstrom. Clement knelt beside Aemon. "Let me see, son." His touch was gentle but firm as he probed Aemon's ribs. Aemon hissed, clamping his jaw shut, sweat beading anew on his forehead. "Broken, I fear," Clement murmured. "Or badly cracked. We need to bind them. Can you sit forward a little?" He helped Aemon ease forward, biting back groans, and began winding long strips of cloth tightly around his torso, providing crucial support. "You need rest, Aemon. Real rest. And bone broth. Lots of it." "And you?" Alianor asked Clement softly, pausing and cleaning a cut on her own forearm. "Your face." Clement touched his swollen cheekbone gingerly. "A small price. A reminder of the cost of truth." He looked between them, his expression grave. "He's contained. For now. Jory and Mick have him locked in the assay office. But he's not silent. He rages. He spits threats. He names names. Yours especially. Alianor. Claims witchcraft. Claims you bewitched Thorn. Bewitched the earth itself against him." A shiver ran down Alianor's spine, remembering the venom in Roland's eyes as he lunged. "He demands to be taken before the king's justice, claiming only the crown can judge a peer." "Peer?" Aemon spat the word out through gritted teeth as Clement tightened the binding. "He's a murderer and a thief. The king's justice can hang him as easily as any commoner, especially with proof." His hand instinctively went to his side where the ring would have been, finding only the rough bandage. His eyes sought Alianor's. "The ring?" "Safe," Alianor murmured, her hand briefly touching the hidden pocket sewn into her kirtle beneath the ruined Samite gown. The solid weight of the signet ring, the small forms of the carved wolf and sparrow, were talismans against the lingering terror. But Father Clement is right. Roland shouting about witchcraft. It's dangerous. Sister Marjorie will lap that up like sacramental wine. She'll be whispering it in every ear she can find. "The narrative is already shifting," Clement said grimly, finishing Aemon's binding. "Even amidst the rescue, I heard mutterings. Some marveled at your courage, Alianor, calling you a savior. Others, they whispered about the blood you drew, the ring appearing like magic, the cave-in happening just as you defied him. Fear makes fertile ground for superstition, and Marjorie is a master cultivator." He dipped a fresh rag in the water. "Your hand, my lady." Alianor extended her arm again. The cold water stung the raw flesh. "We need to act," she said, the words gaining strength as she focused on the practical. "Roland cannot stay locked in that shed. He's too dangerous, too connected. His allies, his men-at-arms who fled, they might regroup. We need authority, real authority." "The sheriff," Aemon stated, "Lord William de Furnival. He holds the king's writ in Derbyshire. He's no friend to Roland. Their families have feuded over mining rights for years. He'd relish seeing Roland brought low, if the evidence is strong enough." "And it is," Alianor insisted. "The ring. Lord Edmund's accusation about Sir Godfrey, the cave-in caused by his reckless greed, his treatment of me." She faltered for a second, the memories threatening to surface. She forced them down. Witnesses, dozens of them. Miners, villagers, Father Clement, Bess. Lord Edmund's testimony. Clement sighed, wiping his hands. It was a moment of startling clarity, sent by God, I believe. But will it hold? He's retreated back into his fog. When the sheriff questions him, he may say nothing or babble nonsense. And accusing a lord of murdering another lord, it requires irrefutable proof beyond the word of a failing old man, however lucid he seemed at the time. "Then we have the ring," Alianor said firmly, "and we have Roland's own actions witnessed by half the barony, his tyranny, his disregard for life." She finished cleaning her arm. "We need to send for de Furnival immediately, and we need to secure Hawksmere properly." "The men look to you, Alianor," Aemon said quietly. He'd been watching her, the way her spine straightened as she focused, the fire rekindling in her eyes, tempered now by grim determination rather than terror. They saw you today, not just commanding the rescue, but digging alongside them, binding their wounds. Tom, Gareth, they'll follow your lead. For now. The weight of that responsibility settled on her shoulders, heavy as stone. Leading a rescue was one thing. Governing a traumatized, divided estate on the brink of ruin was another. She thought of the depleted coffers Roland had plundered, the neglected fields, the widows and orphans the cave-in had created, the deep-seated fear Roland had instilled. And Roland himself, a poisonous viper in a flimsy cage. We need a council, she decided. Tonight, in the Great Hall, Tom, Gareth, Father Clement, Bess, anyone level-headed who can speak for the miners, the villagers. We need to decide how to hold things together until the sheriff arrives. And we need to send that rider to Chesterfield now. Clement nodded. I'll find Tom. He knows the swiftest riders, and I'll spread word about the council. He rose stiffly. Eamon, you need to be off that leg. I'll have Bess bring broth and blankets to the solar. It's the warmest room we can manage. He looked at Alianor. My lady, you need rest too, and clean clothes. Alianor looked down at the ruined green samite, the symbol of her forced marriage now stained with Roland's blood, miner's blood, and mine dirt. It felt like a shroud. Burn it, she said flatly. I never want to see it again. The great hall of Hawksmere Keep that evening was a far cry from Roland's wedding feast. The long trestle tables were pushed aside. A large trestle table stood near the hearth, where a meager fire fought against the pervasive chill. The air smelled of damp wool, wood smoke, and the lingering tang of fear and grief. The faces gathered around the table were etched with exhaustion and worry. Old Tom, his massive arms crossed, his expression grim. Gareth, the mine foreman, hollow-eyed, his hands still ingrained with dirt he couldn't scrub off. Father Clement, looking older than his years, his bruised face stark in the firelight. Bess, pale but composed, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Alianor, the baker's wife, representing the village women. And Will, the young miner whose cousin Ned had seen the blood on the cobbles, chosen for his fiery spirit and clear voice. Alianor sat at the head of the table. She wore a simple, undyed wool kirtle, borrowed from Bess, her hair braided severely back. She looked young, vulnerable, but her gaze was steady as she surveyed the group. The carved wolf and sparrow rested against her skin. The ring was a heavy secret in her pocket. Eamon sat slightly apart, near the hearth, propped in a sturdy chair with cushions, a blanket over his lap. He was pale, his breathing shallow, but his eyes were alert, watching, lending silent support. The rider left an hour ago for Chesterfield, Clement announced, breaking the heavy silence. He carries my letter, detailing the events, the accusations, and a plea for Lord de Furnival to come with all haste. We should expect him in 2, perhaps 3 days, weather permitting. A collective sigh, part relief, part apprehension, went around the table. And him, Tom growled, jerking his head towards the barred door, leading to the inner chambers where Roland was now held, under heavy guard, in a windowless storeroom. Heard him ranting earlier, like a devil possessed, claims the king will flay us all for laying hands on him. He claims many things, Alianor said, her voice clear and calm. His words are poison, meant to frighten and divide. We must ignore them. Our focus must be on Hawksmere, on the living. She outlined the immediate priorities, her voice gaining strength as she spoke, drawing on the practical skills honed by years of managing a failing estate under Roland's shadow, now amplified by the day's crucible. The injured and the dead. A proper infirmary was needed. Clean bedding, more bandages, someone with herb lore. Alianor volunteered, recalling Eamon's teachings and her own studies. Lists of the injured and the confirmed dead needed compiling. Families needed support, food, firewood, comfort. Father Clement would coordinate spiritual care and the grim task of preparing the dead for burial. The mine. The main entrance was still largely blocked, unstable. Gareth confirmed the vent shaft was the only access point for now, suitable only for inspection. not work. The mine was closed indefinitely. This meant no income from the lead seams, plunging the estate deeper into crisis. Gareth would organize a small, experienced crew to assess the main entrance stability when it was safe. Food insecurity. Osric, Roland's steward, had fled. The estate accounts were a shambles. Bess, with Alianor's help, would inventory the keep's remaining food stores. Tom would organize hunting parties and oversee the distribution fairly. Security was paramount, with Roland's men scattered but potentially dangerous, and general lawlessness a risk in the wake of disaster. Tom and Will would organize a volunteer watch from trusted miners and villagers, men who knew the land, to patrol Hawksmere lands day and night until the sheriff arrived. Weapons from Roland's disarmed guards would be distributed carefully. Roland's men. Any remaining Mowbray. Men-at-arms found lurking were to be detained peacefully if possible, but reported immediately. Their loyalty was suspect. Lord Edmund, he was resting, heavily sedated, with a mild draught Alianor prepared. Bess would care for him. His moment of lucidity was a gift, but they couldn't rely on it holding for the sheriff. The discussion was practical, focused, but underpinned by raw emotion. Gareth spoke haltingly of the men lost, friends he'd sent into danger. Alianor described the fear in the village, the whispers already swirling. Will passionately argued for ensuring Roland faced justice, not just for the mine, but for the years of oppression. Tom emphasized strength and unity. Father Clement urged compassion amidst the necessary firmness. Through it all, Alianor listened, guided, decided. She delegated tasks based on people's strengths. She sought consensus but wasn't afraid to make the final call. When arguments grew heated, her calm voice cut through, refocusing on the immediate need. She acknowledged the fear, the anger, the grief, but steered it towards action. They saw not a vengeful victim, but a leader emerging from the ashes, tempered by fire, focused on survival and justice. Aemon watched her, a fierce pride warming him despite his pain. As the meeting drew to a close, the practical plans laid. A deeper question hung in the air. Tom voiced it, his voice gruff. And when the sheriff comes, Lady Alianor? What then? This. He gestured vaguely around. This running of things. Is it yours? Or question mark. He glanced towards the inner chambers where Lord Edmund lay, then almost imperceptibly towards Aemon. Alianor met his gaze steadily. The question of Hawksmere's future, beyond the immediate crisis, was complex, fraught with legal and social pitfalls. Hawksmere belongs to Lord Edmund de Clervaux, she stated clearly. I act as his steward, as I have done these past months, but now, with the authority of necessity and the will of its people, until the king's justice determines the rightful path forward. She paused, letting her words sink in. My focus, our focus, must be on preserving life, securing justice for the crimes committed here, and healing this land. The future will be decided by law and by the crown, but we will face it together, as Hawksmere. It was a careful answer, acknowledging the legal reality, while asserting her temporary, necessary authority, born of crisis and witnessed courage. It satisfied the council for now. Nods of agreement, weary but resolute, met her words. Later, after the council dispersed to their tasks and the keep settled into an uneasy watchfulness, Alianor climbed the stairs to the solar. Bess had lit a fire and placed a tray with broth, bread, and a small flask of watered wine near the hearth. Aemon was there, asleep in the chair, his head lolled to one side, his face relaxed in slumber, but still pale. The bandages around his chest were stark white against his borrowed tunic. Alianor paused in the doorway, watching him, the fierce protector, the wounded survivor, momentarily at peace. The events of the day crashed over her again, the confrontation, the blood, the desperate rescue, the crushing weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. She leaned against the doorframe, suddenly dizzy with exhaustion, the borrowed kirtle feeling like armor she could no longer bear. She must have made a sound. Eamon's eyes fluttered open. He focused on her, a softness in his gaze she hadn't seen before. Alianor. She pushed away from the doorframe, walking towards the fire, needing its warmth. They're resting. Or trying to. The watch is set. The rider is gone. She sank onto a low stool near his chair, staring into the flames. It feels fragile, like spun glass. One wrong move. It won't break, Eamon said quietly. His voice was rough with sleep and pain, but firm. You held it together today. You held them together. You'll hold it now. She shook her head, wrapping her arms around herself, the borrowed wool scratchy against her skin. I held a knife. I dug in the mud. I shouted orders. That was reaction, survival. This? She gestured vaguely, encompassing the keep, the estate, the future. This is different. The accounts are a ruin. The mine is dead. There are widows, orphans, Roland's allies, the sheriff. What if de Furnival doesn't believe us? What if Roland spins his lies? What if? Her voice hitched. The fear she'd held at bay for hours threatened to engulf her. What if he gets free? Eamon reached out slowly, wincing slightly, and covered her clenched hands with his own. Look at me, Alianor. She forced her gaze up to meet his. The intensity in his eyes was almost overwhelming. You are not alone, he stated, each word deliberate. You have Tom, Gareth, Clement, Bess. The people saw you, they trust you, and you have me. He squeezed her hands gently. I'm not going anywhere, not this time. Broken ribs, mend. His words, the simple promise, the unwavering certainty in his gaze, were a balm. A tear escaped, tracing a clean path through the grime still smudged on her cheek. He took so much, she whispered, the raw pain surfacing. He took Hawksmere. He took my peace. He took... She couldn't finish, couldn't articulate the violation, the nights of terror. He took nothing that defines you, Eamon countered, his voice low and fierce. He tried to break you. He failed. What I saw today, that fire, that strength, that was always you, Alianor. He just forced you to find it. He lifted one hand, hesitantly, and brushed the tear away with his thumb, his touch feather-light. He can't touch you now. Not ever again, not while I draw breath, and not while Hawksmere stands with you. His touch sent a jolt through her, different from the anchor grip in the chapel. It was tender, intimate, a promise of something beyond survival. She leaned into it, just slightly, the warmth of his hand against her cheek, a stark contrast to the chilling memories of Roland's touch. The carved sparrow and wolf seemed to pulse against her skin. You need to rest, Eamon murmured, his thumb tracing the line of her cheekbone. Proper rest. You're swaying on that stool. The exhaustion was indeed a physical weight, but the thought of her chamber, the room she'd shared with Roland, filled her with cold dread. She couldn't go back there. Not yet. Perhaps not ever. Eamon seemed to read her thoughts. The solar is warm. The door has a stout bolt. He gestured towards a pile of blankets and cushions Bess had left near the hearth. Sleep here, by the fire. I'll keep watch. He managed a weak smile. Guard duty is lighter when you're sitting down. It was a simple solution, offered without pressure, acknowledging her fear. Gratitude washed over her, warm and profound. She nodded, unable to speak. She moved to the pile of bedding, arranging cushions near the hearth's warmth, within sight of Eamon's chair. She pulled a thick blanket around her shoulders, the wool smelling faintly of lavender. Bess's touch. She lay down, curling onto her side, facing the fire, and Eamon. The flames danced, casting flickering shadows on the stone walls. The silence of the keep was deeper now, punctuated only by the crackle of the fire and Eamon's steady, slightly labored breathing. She watched him, the strong line of his profile illuminated by the firelight. The bandages a reminder of his sacrifice, his presence a shield against the darkness. The fear didn't vanish. The weight of the crown of responsibility didn't lift. The ghosts of the day, the blood, the screams, Roland's venomous eyes still lurked at the edges of her consciousness. But here, by the fire, with Aemon keeping watch, a fragile sense of safety, of sanctuary, began to seep into her bones. She wasn't alone. Hawksmere wasn't lost. The fight wasn't over. But for this moment, they had won a crucial battle. The carved wolf rested near her heart, no longer just a symbol of defiance, but of survival. And the carved sparrow? Perhaps, just perhaps, it could dare to hope for flight. Her eyelids grew heavy, the warmth of the fire and the exhaustion finally claiming her. The last thing she saw before sleep pulled her under was Aemon's eyes, watching over her in the firelight, holding the line against the night. The weight of the crown was heavy, but for the first time in a long, long time, Alianor de Clervaux did not feel crushed beneath it. She felt, instead, the first stirrings of the strength needed to bear it. The scandalous hours had passed. The long dawn of reckoning and rebuilding had begun.
And so, amid the ashes of Hawksmere, we see the cruel arithmetic of survival. Every victory demands a toll, every truth a crown of thorns. The mine lies silent, the tyrant caged, and the widow, no, the lady, stands reborn beneath her own firelight. Yet even as Alianor sleeps beside her guardian flame, the world stirs. The tongues of the fearful whisper, "Witch." The wounded cling to hope, and the law, cold, distant and merciless, rides toward Hawksmere with judgment in its saddlebag. The scandalous hours have not ended, my loves. They have only changed their shape. For what is more scandalous than a woman who refuses to die quietly? Until the next toll of the chapel bell, I remain as ever your devoted chronicler of sins and survivals, Lady Aurelia Ravenshade.